campers and glampers, welcome to the very, very late 13,000 subscriber video. While this video is very late, it's late because a lot of things happened. Things kept happening, and now I can finally cover it all, and in a way, I would not have been able to make the same video a year ago. Least of all because of my computer situation. I'll be going through some of your questions, but I may end up answering some of them while I give you guys a bit of an update as well with what's been happening to myself and the channel. Even things regarding what other videos I've wanted to make since the beginning and could be making in the future. I'll try my best to answer some of your channel related questions in a way to try and minimize follow-up questions as well, in the vein of, but why can't you just do this? Hopefully without getting too wordy. Even though I just know someone's gonna think they have all the answers and assume I haven't already explored them. So with all that said, let's get down to the origin stuff. What was the first Friday the 13th movie I ever saw? Why do I like Jason so much? Where did I get the costume? What are my channel origins? What inspired me to do YouTube? How long have I been stalking strangers on Amigo? And what is my dream? Well, the first Friday the 13th movie I saw was the original 1980 movie on June Friday the 13th, 1997. Earlier that evening was two other movies. One I don't even remember anymore, the other being Scream. The first scene where Drew said Jason was the killer and Ghostface corrected her that Pamela was the original killer and Jason was the killer in the sequels piqued my interest. And then after watching Friday the 13th later that night, and loving it more than Scream, I made it my mission after that night to sort out some of the sequels in the video store. I was really attracted to watching the one with Jason stabbing through the shower curtain because I was aware there was a movie with an in the shower scene kill. Obviously, I was thinking of another movie. All of the movies were rated R though, so there was no way that I could rent them. But then I noticed a hockey mask on another video under J with F. Of course, it was Jason Goes to Hell, The Final Friday. I was pretty sure that it was from the same video series, and it was rated MA15+, so I had to rent it. So I rented it over and over, and I really loved the look of Jason in that movie, for as little time as he was on screen. And seeing that glove grab the mask at the end, that also kept Freddy Krueger in the back of my mind for later, even though I didn't know him or the films by name at that point. And also seeing as in the first movie I only ever saw Jason briefly, and his mum for only the third act, I figured after seeing Jason Goes to Hell that was kind of the format with the other movies. It wasn't until they had the VHS tapes on sale, and I bought the third one, that I found that maybe each movie's approach is a little different. The Part 3 VHS also had a hockey mask in the top corner of the Australian release, and just from that little subtle difference to the other VHS tapes, I figured that was the first movie that the hockey mask comes into play. While watching Part 3 over and over, there was always that snippet of the end of Part 2, and just that was enough to piece together the origin and lore for me. And at the time, I was constantly the subject of 90s style bullying, and my less than kind father had left a few years ago. I also then learned from my mum that she was going to name me Jason, so I started to feel a little connected to the series. I was also really into movie magic, and after only seeing the first and last Friday the 13th movie at the time, seeing all the creative and sometimes familiar special effects kills in Part 3, and just a look of that classic Jason with the iconic hockey mask, I couldn't get enough of it. In 1998, Todd McFarlane came out with the Movie Maniacs figures, and that's when I bought the Jason Goes to Hell figure and started cosplaying that Jason very poorly, wearing an old navy blue Adidas jumper, black pants, and terrible paper mache hockey mask with black elastic straps stapled on. By 99, I had seen and recorded the first 3 and the last Nightmare on Elm Street movies, which in retrospect was the only 4 I ever needed to see. Later that year, I found out that Jason Takes Manhattan was going to be on really late at night. So late, when I stayed up to record it while cutting the ads out, the ads had just as much screen time as the movie, and it made it drag on for 4 hours. But I survived the night. After Jason X failed to screen in any cinema that I could get to back in 2002, Freddy vs. Jason got a wide release the next year, and the Jason X DVD finally came out, and I decided to rent and marathon the whole series. My sister also decided to have a horror night sleepover with a few friends some weekends later, using Jason X as the feature movie. By then, I had already bought a better hockey mask, quote unquote, from Toys R Us, cheap $10 glow-in-the-dark mask. I then also had a black uber Jason looking machete, I don't know where that is these days, and I had heavy steel cap boots. I stomped onto the back porch attached to the lounge room where her and her friends were, and they had just seen a death scene in the movie. And the extra screens that I was able to milk out of them was music to my ears. However, in 2004, shortly after getting Freddy vs. Jason DVD, my cosplaying of Jason soon ended with a long-term relationship, and that and my other hobbies, and even the core of who I am. It was after that relationship had ended at the end of 2009, I picked up immediately where I left off. First thing I did was start getting new costume parts. I didn't like the costume store costumes, so with custom Jason masks and merchandise on the rise after the remake came and went, I resorted to eBay, regular yard work clothes, and random zombie costume parts. I attended zombie walks and conventions, creeping people out by storming around and subtly casting my gaze in their direction. No chasing people or screaming at people, unlike some of the other Jason cosplayers that I saw at the time, and that's when I knew I was onto something. In 2014, I wanted to get back into making YouTube videos. I already had a YouTube account from 2006 that went through several phases from old music video edits, reply videos, guitar covers, and GTA Online shenanigans. But I wanted to start fresh, with a fresh look and channel name that wasn't tied to my old profiles. The only problem being I didn't know what I wanted to do yet. I'd seen some Amigo scare prank videos, but it didn't even cross my mind at first to cosplay Jason on there. I originally thought I wanted to do something a bit different from scare pranks and instead play guitar pranks. The idea being, I see someone on Amigo, they ask me to play something, and I would play it just fine, but it would be a little bit too loud. Then one day, I got a bit frustrated reading news about the Friday the 13th remake script at the time, not getting much further than that. There was already a winter script, I think, by that point, and this was the found footage fail. I thought to myself that there was another gap forming between one film and the next, and just not much Jason content out there that I really could enjoy. And that's when I realized I wanted to cosplay Jason on Amigo, and make people remember. I spent a few months on Amigo from there just practicing, before I eventually thought I should include my guitar's loop pedal and have that iconic It made all the difference, and that's when I was ready to start recording on Friday the 13th of March 2015. Then I made all the graphics for the channel. Only setback was recording and editing my first video. I didn't think about an intro, so I quickly slapped one together and played the theme tune from the remake on my Yamaha SHS-10 from the early 90s and then uploaded it. Forgetting to also make an outro clip. And that's when the channel was born, March 31st, 2015, which is kind of March 13 flipped the other way around. For me, though, it was actually April 1st in Australia, April Fool's Day. Additionally, people seem to think that the tags I use are my own interests, or wonder why I don't scare people on certain interests. To answer that, firstly, being that it's called Jason Takes Omegle, I try to think of the kind of people that Jason would be going after in this day and age, and that's where I get my ideas for interests. Secondly, if you don't see people scared on a certain tag, I'm probably using those tags, or I've abandoned them, because they don't get the reactions that I'm after. Now, about that dream, I think I answer this later in the video when I start discussing the rebranding of this channel. So to catch up to now, let's go back to last year. Originally, I was going to collaborate with another YouTuber for the ending of Series 4. The scheduling meant that it wasn't going to be done in time to meet the deadline of that video. I can't really divulge much more on that, as it would easily give away the YouTuber and ruin the surprise if there was a way that we could revisit that idea in the future. The lack of Michael Myers in Series 4 also came mostly down to scheduling, as we only had the one day that worked for both of us over the course of filming for Series 4. The other difficulty being that a slow tension character like Michael was quickly skipped before he can appear on their screens. Towards the end, we tried having me on screen first and then switch out so that he could do his thing, which you see more of. In contrast, people are always running from him at horror events. Omegle is just a hard platform to crack for slow tension, and that's why there's more scenes with Freddy in Series 3, even though we also had just the one day for that as well. Series 4 also started a little later than I was aiming for, as did Series 2. Part of the reason for that was because there were meant to be victims in both series, even Series 3. Difference being there, I wasn't strung along in Series 3, unlike 2 and 4. However, as most of you know, I found a workaround, which I think I used a little bit in Series 2, but it was a bit more apparent in Series 3, and I think it was a bit absent for Series 4. Again, I thought a real victim was going to be a short thing. You would all know this workaround as the scream from another room, which hardcore Friday the 13th fans will recognize is from the same movie I lifted the Jason scream from when I worked on the jump scare video with Nuke Norway. For anyone that's unfamiliar with what I'm talking about, it's where after a certain amount of time in front of a stranger, where I might not be getting the reaction I'm after in the time frame I want, we hear a woman scream, and I would just abandon the stranger on Amigo and turn my attention to the off-screen voice and murder her before returning, if the stranger was still even there. And that brings us to Series 5. Now this is the big one. So big, I've had to divide it into several points, and while some of these points affect the channel as a whole, it hits the Amigo series the hardest. The last deadline I had for Series 5 was October 13th, 2017. Originally, I was aiming for this date to be the end of Series 5. Of course, there's been some roadblocks, as some of you may know already from the live streams. These are the points that I'll be getting into in more detail than I've discussed even in streams. As an overview, we all want to see new guests in Series 5. Some returning guests, even an actual victim this time. I don't want to repeat a Series 2, and neither do any of you. So let's take a step back and address some of those issues. At this stage, I don't know what guests I will have. Until my computer is fixed and the studio is set up around that, there's no point in actively seeking anyone out or contacting anyone that's expressed interest in the last year. Having moved interstate also affects previous guests, Michael and Freddie. I still get messages from Michael wanting to do more, as you guys have done the same, but in this current situation, he would need to be flown down and back. I made a poster back on May 13th of 2015, midway through Series 1, advertising for a victim to be in future Amigo videos. To be clear, they would have to be in the same room as me to get live reactions on Amigo. Even if someone were to play a standard role to help me make a video for potential actors to see a demonstration of what they would be expected to do, to some extent without giving away trade secrets. I would also need someone not only from Australia, but within 1, maybe 2 hours from where I am. Reason why? Freddie and Michael live close to each other, but both of them lived about 2 hours away from me, and we've seen the impact that that's made on trying to add them to videos. At first, there was some interest from friends to take on the role, but when the early schedules to fit with American time zones, the hours involved, level of makeup, rehearsals, talking to strangers, acting, blood and stunt work really starts to sink in, they don't get much further than the initial explanation, or even the screen and makeup tests, because people are too used to seeing minimum effort videos get lots of views. When I did start having potential actors get past the email stage into meeting face to face, things were looking better at first, but then going from how much you explain in an ad to having to explain it face to face like I did with friends, the result ends up being the same, and they weren't as keen on the idea. At the beginning of 2017, I had 2 hopefuls contact me, and their enthusiasm gave me very high hopes. Unfortunately, one was interstate at the time, and by the time the other one contacted me, I was at the point of no return with moving interstate myself. I've since had 2 people from Melbourne that expressed interest in being a victim before I even moved down, and even not long after moving down I had 2 more put their hands up. I can only hope that they aren't too scared by what's really involved. I have several scenarios to try and fit people's level of acting ability and comfortability, but even the simplest of scenarios may be a bit much for most people. But we'll see when the time comes. For a few years now, even before this channel existed, my girlfriend and I have toyed with the idea of moving from Sydney to Melbourne. We would be further from family, but more and more of our friends were moving down here for the lower rent and the higher job opportunities, and we were feeling much of the same stress. My girlfriend was the first to move down and stay with a few friends, as she already had a bit of experience in her field and fresh qualifications. As time went on though, the need for her to move out of our friend's place increased, which meant that I had to move down soon. Just as the channel was demonetized at the end of March, I went into moving out mode for the next few months. When I moved out at the end of July, it came with a lot of issues ranging from not being able to move everything down, including camera tripods, which I really need, the removalist costing more than the original quote, my computer being broken while in transit on their truck, which wasn't covered by the insurance I paid or the contract agreement with them, so I saw little to nothing from them to get it fixed. So that's broken, and it still is. The toilet also ended up having tree roots in the pipes, causing a blockage, and that took the real estate 2 months to fix. And lastly, the gas heater, which stopped working after 2 weeks of moving in the dead of winter, gave us a 2-month size bill, and that took the real estate 3 months to fix. And now that I've covered that, let's get into everyone's favorite subject over the last year and a half, demonetization. Going back to around the end of March 2017, my channel's revenue was still on the rise off the back of the Friday the 13th game beta streams and the Amigo videos that would be watched afterward. It was on that fateful day at the end of March, though, that my revenue suddenly took a dive and effectively flatlined. Looking at where it is now, it no longer looks like a movie flatline, but rather a real flatline, where there are faint signs of life, but by clinical definition is dead, at a couple of cents here and there. The worst part was that my views were still rising, especially when the Friday the 13th game released, and my Amigo videos were again getting even more views. That was up until the end of August, when the tools to request the videos be monetized started getting rolled out. So I'd already missed out on monetizing those views. Since my videos were already getting affected by the 10-minute algorithm, I had already set up PayPal, Patreon, and merch well before demonetization hit. To help the channel grow faster with more costumes, maybe find paid victims, and a film crew for other videos and pranks, since my channel up to this point has just been me the whole time, and the only way it's ever going to expand is with other people. But over the last 2 years, there just hasn't been enough there to spend 100% of my time on the channel the way that I used to, let alone do these things. This is when I needed to find more and better work back in April last year, but to no avail. The few videos that did meet the requirements of 1,000 views in a week, which were 2 of the Freddy Amigo videos from 2 years ago, were remonetized, but the views boost that I had already dried up by then. Since moving down, between everything else that's been happening, I've been trying to find work down here, but haven't gotten a single interview yet, which isn't uncommon for me. My 9-to-5 work history has always been spotty, and I've never lasted in those types of jobs for more than a year. Everywhere that I've worked for, I've been fired from, or they've gone out of business while I was there, or within a few months, or maybe a few years shortly after I was gone, due largely to their own work practices, or rather, work practices that they didn't preach and were caught out for too many times. What that meant for me, though, was that I never really got the industry experience anywhere, or referees that I could use from these sorts of jobs. Obviously, neither work or YouTube is working out for me right now, so I'm a bit of a crossroads. I'm still looking for work, obviously, but every hour of work eats into the 20 plus hours that it takes to make an Amigo video, which drags this whole process on even longer. Even the Jason scares that I've been doing at Horror Movie Campout no longer seem to have a future, but I'll get into that in a minute. I do design work when and where I can, and even get payouts from Redbubble for a few original designs that outsell my JTO merchandise by, no joke, 13 to 1. But that's only enough between me and my girlfriend to pay the bills and eat on a budget. As good as that food looks on Instagram, it's all store brand. I'm just that good. Speaking of things I'm good at, Horror Movie Campout has been the only place where I've been called back to do one of the few things I'm good at, and even then, with too few sales for the distance travelled to do the Horror Movie Campout in Perth, they had already booked Freddie and Michael because they still live in Sydney. But with me recently moving at the time, when they went to book my flights, they looked at those sales numbers in Perth and had to drop me. On top of that, they couldn't even afford to host in Adelaide at all that year, for the same reason. It was later found that they cancelled the Melbourne event in December as well, and that's where we found out there have been problems with the promoter. There hasn't been a word since of another Horror Movie Campout to happen in the future, so there goes the steady acting work for me. The first event that I tried attending since moving to Melbourne, to take my mind off things, try and get back up on my feet maybe, and gain an otherwise non-existent following in Australia, was VidCon Melbourne. I had bought the tickets when they were on sale at the start of 2017, and followed them on all social media. They even liked one of my photos on Instagram a week before the convention. But then it happened. I arrived at the familiar Melbourne Convention Centre, where I attended PAX the year before and later that year. I was in the queue before they opened, not bothering anyone, and participating when I was asked for a photo with people. When the doors opened, I went in and started doing the rounds, checking out what was there, as more people asking for a photo with me, while other times groups of girls would accidentally bump into me and scream before running off. A typical convention for me, really. I was able to even talk to a long-time associate at the Sour Candy Strip booth, as well as the guys at the PAX booth who remembered me from a few weeknights prior attending their mini-convention during the evening with a string of police officers behind me, joking about how absurd that night was. How naive we were. It was shortly after talking with them that I was approached by a security guard that was literally shaking, trademark, and she was asking me to leave the convention hall. I asked her why, to which she replied with, "The first and only answer I will accept as their real reason. I didn't fit the tone and branding of VidCon." After trying to name off some of the featured YouTubers that dealt with gore, while my channel hasn't done any blood or gore yet, I told her that I didn't want to debate this topic on the convention floor because I didn't want to take my masks off in full view of the public, and when I'm talking inside the costume it sounds like I'm yelling underneath the masks, which wasn't really helping her. She also needed me to turn off my sound, as she wasn't coping too well with it on either. So I suggested we take the issue into a back room that I knew from the PAX convention, and that this be discussed with someone to moderate. She agreed with my brilliant idea, and we went in. I then proceeded to comply gracefully with her orders and took the masks off, and removed and turned off my speaker. She had been in constant contact the whole time with the executive producer, updating her on what I had been saying, and by the time she had arrived, I started to debate the issue that we'd already discussed, that they were discriminating against who gets to be at VidCon, despite having similar content. She then changed the issue to security, citing an incident in removing someone in a Spider-Man morph suit because they couldn't see their face. All of this without context as to whether they were a nuisance or whether they had a creator or a community badge. I already took my masks off. I told them about my channel and the reputation that I have to uphold at conventions and other events, and I would have gladly shown them ID so that if I did cause trouble, I would be held accountable. There was nothing about it in their policies, despite covering other policies relating to cosplay at the event. But they stood firm, and I had no choice but to leave, or walk around the convention still with most of the costume on, but no speaker, and only the hockey mask on my head, unless it was for a photo, showing my face to potential new subscribers, as well as some subscribers that had attended to see me, but they never got that. And that would have been a slap in the face to the rest of you that have followed me for years, so I demanded that I be assured a refund if I left right then and there, and after 2 months I finally got that. Now they've actually made it a rule that people can't attend VidCon with masks, so you can actually thank me for that. But if you want to see me at VidCon, follow them, let them know, and especially when you see them release a nomination form to vote for featured creators, get onto it, because that's the only way that it's ever going to be happening at this point. Despite everything that's been happening over the last year, I've tried to stream as often as I could and work on other videos in some form or another, whether it's scripting, getting new costume stuff, looking for talent, or filming the few videos that I have been able to upload. Regarding streams, eventually I would like to either make those move over to just Twitch, or after I've streamed them on YouTube, they would just go to a playlist on my channel as they are now, but are otherwise unlisted videos, because I want this channel to go back to its roots of just video content. It's been hard making new videos, because the laptop that I'm left with doesn't have the I/O audio ports that I had been using since this channel started, and it doesn't work with the mixing board either. And editing on here, it just doesn't have the computing power to keep up with the level of editing that I do, and it regularly crashes. It's just not suitable for recording Omegle or YouNow videos, let alone editing them. Filming other videos that don't involve screen recording is possible, as you guys have seen, but when it comes back to editing, it's ill-equipped and it's just not powerful enough. On the subject of new videos, when I realized I wanted to make Amigo videos with Jason, other Amigo videos came to mind as well, but I obviously wanted to do more with Jason, and I wanted to involve other movie maniacs as well. But I couldn't really think of a different channel name at the time, and obviously didn't have the budget for it, so I stuck with Jason Takes Omegle. That being said, if this channel can pick up again, I want to change the name of the channel to suit the direction that I always wanted to take it. Channel 13, The Curse Network. The concept behind this would be like a showcase of different movie maniacs in different scenarios and putting a dark twist on the mundane. One example I bring up in streams sometimes is Jason ASMR videos and Cooking with Leatherface. It would be a regular cooking show with real ingredients, making real food that'll look gross, but it will be edible. With Chop Top Sawyer reading out these ingredients and how to prepare these meals, the twist is, he's holding the camera and barking all the orders to Leatherface, while Leatherface stumbles around the kitchen doing the actual preparations. Each dish that features meat, Leatherface will have to go out and bring some fresh meat back. Through the kitchen, kicking and screaming, out back and taking a cut for the meal in that video. All of this comes at a cost, obviously, and now more than ever, I need help to make it happen. Someone suggested last year I open a GoFundMe to see if I could get some help with getting my computer repaired, but at $25, I was a little bit shy to say the least of the money that I needed. There's money from my YouTube revenue obviously, but that peaked just shy of payout and had been stagnant for the last year until I got a few super chats in May, so I got that last month. But even with my cut from Jason Takes Omegle Redbubble merchandise, I've made about $30 from that. And lastly, donations I've gotten over the last 2 years. All of that would still come up short at just a few $100s. But priority number one for the money that I get from this channel is to spend on new costumes and props and other incidentals directly related to making videos. However, if I was making enough to spend on costumes and computer upgrades, I would have no problem doing that. And that's where some of you guys might be able to come in. I know I should have made this video a year ago, but I thought I'd be back up on my feed by now. I've been getting message after message to make more Amigo videos, and I've wanted to, especially with the costumes that I'd already gotten a start on before moving down, and with all these other videos that I want to make. Eventually, I'd also like to be able to afford to fly down Freddie and Michael. So if you want to support the channel, there's the merch that I've mentioned. If you catch me in a stream, you can leave a super chat and you'll get a Steam badge and emotes for that. You can make a direct donation to my PayPal. And lastly, if you want to support me regularly, I've also had Patreon for a while, and the money that I've already been getting from that has been helping with costumes this last year. Currently on my Patreon, I've been able to post behind the scenes pictures and videos for some of the Patreons that have been able to enjoy that over the last few years. Some even have access to a Discord channel where I'm able to upload it much quicker up there. Eventually what I would like to be able to do is expand and provide bigger and better Patreon exclusives, such as photo sets of Jason hunting down victims. If there's any things that you guys would like, I would love to hear your suggestions, because I'd really like to get this Patreon up and running so that I can provide more videos. One of the other things on Patreon that I do have is to also release uncensored versions of videos that would otherwise be demonetized on YouTube. So there'll be that as well. Now with all those updates out of the way and a lot of your questions over the last year have been answered, let's get into some of the questions that don't fit the current state of this channel. Where am I from? Well, originally I'm from a country town in New South Wales. I spent pre-kinder in Lower and Far West Sydney. I lived out my entire schooling years in Brisbane, Queensland. Then I moved back down to New South Wales for just over a decade, now currently living in Victoria. What are my costume and makeup expenses? Can I do a tutorial for editing effects on Omegle so you guys can join me? And what's the easiest way to meet me on Omegle? So, costume expenses vary depending on what needs replacing, but it's usually around the $50 mark plus $35 shipping. If it's something that I can repaint, that's still about $10-20 because I give everything a fresh coat so it stays consistent. As for makeup costs, that would be $0. because it's a latex mask that I wear over a small headset and mic, as you can see in my Vine compilation video. As for the tutorial for editing effects that I use to make Jason on Omegle, I kind of just answered that one. It's a costume. It's not face rig or any other software, it's just me standing there, sweating for 24 hours per video, so you're more than welcome to try and do the same. Lastly, the easiest way to meet me on Omegle, well, follow me on Twitter, because that's when I'll be mentioning when I'm going to start recording new videos. The only other hint I can give is look at the tags that I managed to scare people on. That's where you'll probably find me. If the tutorial is more on how I edit my videos to look the way they do after I've recorded on Omegle, I would, but then what I would be doing for Series 5 is using OBS, where I just make that same layout and then put the Omegle screens in there for myself and the stranger. That will save me a lot of time. So there's a free hint right there on how to do at least that much. As for the intro and outro, I might do something make up your own intro and outro. I don't know if I'm going to use the same intro for Series 5. I think I'm going to do a fresh one for that with the new costumes, and obviously same for the outro. I can probably do something of a tutorial for that, but we'll see. Streaming on Omegle and public pranks. So the two main problems with streaming Omegle pranks is that I would need an assistant to constantly be on the ball to blur the stranger's screen, because the alternative is streaming penis and titties, and that's how you get your YouTube channel banned. The problem with blurring, though, is that they would have to blur before the other person's screen appears, and if that person screams and leaves too fast, guaranteed that reaction just got blurred. The second problem is that there's a lot of people that keep their camera off until they can see who's on the other side. So there's just a lot of black screens, and not everyone's scared of Jason, so it would be a very boring stream of blurred strangers, blank screens, and people telling me to get a life before they skip me. Why would you want that? Public pranks is technically more doable, but it's even worse. Unless we're talking about the DM Pranks channel, almost every public prank channel you've ever seen is staged in some way, and even to an extent, DM Pranks is somewhat changed these days because the stooge is someone that their friends know. A while ago, they did an interview with a prank reviewer, and a lot of the cost goes into court costs. They try their best at having an uncostumed friend stop the stooge that they scared and have them come sign a release form. But sometimes those people get away, or there's other witnesses on the street or even in a building that later sue them. To get around some of these issues, myself, I would need insurance, I would need first aid medics in case myself or someone else gets injured, because then I'm liable. I would need public relations officers as well to stop the stooge from running off, calling the cops, that sort of thing, get them to sign that release form. I would also need cameramen and actors for me to perform kills on, because that would be better than directly chasing after people. If I recall correctly from the interview with DM Pranks as well, they usually spend around 10,000 euros per video, and they were still being sued by several people to a combined 300,000 euros. But if you can also show a court that you've taken as much reasonable care as possible in your prank, you can get those costs down or thrown out of court altogether. But real pranks are not something that police or courts are fond of in the first place, and that varies from bad to worse, depending on your country, your state, and your judge. So maybe if I reach over 13 million subscribers, I can afford to do those sorts of pranks. Even citing the last video that I put out, it was a parody of public pranks, and an unboxing video of the Part 3 hockey mask. But when we started filming the actual pranks portion, there were so many people walking through there with concerns, and it took everything to make sure that police weren't involved, even though we weren't actually pranking them. We were just filming the two of us. That's me on the first bike, and in different shirts and pants, and a clever cover-up of pixelating my face like as if I'm someone that didn't consent to a release form. Am I ever going to do a part 2 Jason on Omegle, and how many costumes do I have? Well, this question hasn't aged well. I think I was already working on the costume when I got this question, but not everyone sees my tweets or my behind the scenes pictures and videos. But now I've completed 3 Jason costumes. Chop Top is in the works, and as soon as he's done, I'm doing Leatherface. I've been playing guitar for 16 years now, and I want to work it more and more into the musical score of my videos, but more as a kind of otherworldly and haunting sound that underpins the rest of the score. Ultimately, I want to come up with Jason-inspired original music for my intros, outros, and of course the meat of the video. When I have the time and the money to do those things, you guys have seen the results with each series evolving. What would I do if I met and talked to Kane Hodder? Honestly, I have no clue what I would do. I would probably give him the firmest handshake I've ever given anyone. I don't really think about these things though, because it never really works out how it does in your head. You kind of set yourself up for failure when you do. So I just play it by ear like I do on Amigo, see how he reacts and speaks, and play off that. My favourite Jason in terms of tone and design would be Part 7 and Part 9, but Part 4 in terms of viciousness in the 3rd act. I've been debating with myself about a favourite Friday the 13th movie for a long time, let alone making a list video. After years and years of watching, even the less popular movies, some have grown on me, and with all the problems present in other movies, they all kind of even out. If I ever do pick a favourite, I'll release a list video. Until then, I just have to keep watching. Do I like Savini Jason though? The facial design is about what I expected after seeing a post from Savini. He was looking through Google Images or something to that effect for medical deformities as inspiration. The rest of the design is also pretty badass, with that devil trident, and trying to fit him into the lore between Jason Goes to Hell and Freddy vs. Jason is quite interesting. I think there would have to be another Jason between Savini Jason and Freddy vs. Jason, where he goes back to hell again, and stripped of his demonic powers. As far as playing Savini Jason, he's kind of more of a trophy that sits in my character's select screen at this point, that I can wave at people that always find new reasons to complain that they deserve Savini Jason. And I've already explained on Twitter 100 times, despite the Sony and Microsoft leaks, why he's staying under wraps, and he better stay that way. Is the 2009 movie canon? No. It's just a retelling of the first 4 films. Some people would argue 3, but the protagonist character is essentially the Rob Deere character from Part 4 looking for his sister from Part 2, rather than seeking revenge for her death, where the sister in this one is more like Ginny Field, the final girl in Part 2, rather than Sandra Deere, the girl that gets pinned to her boyfriend into the bed with a spear in Part 2. So it's not a sequel to add to the canon, nor did it ever get a sequel, and it didn't do a good enough job to stand in for the originals, so it can just go in the trash with the rest of the failed attempts at a reboot. Opinion on a future Jason movie. As much as the heads of Paramount want to bury this franchise, there's obviously people under Paramount that have a passion for the series and want to see it resurrected, as do the fans. The script that was released was okay, but I don't lose sleep over the movie never seeing the light of day. I would have canned it as well. But as much as New Line love having their hands on the franchise as well, they aren't going to do it any favours. A Nightmare on Elm Street became a self-inflicted meme after Part 3, and the remake is one of the worst of the horror remakes out there, where the Friday the 13th and Texas Chainsaw Massacre remakes are among the better ones. So even the lower grossing later Paramount movies, like Friday the 13th Part 7, has grown fans over time, and the problem with Part 8 was simply a budget issue, where the marketing team kept pushing that it was going to be a Manhattan-centric movie. But again, people have grown to love Part 8, and it has the darkest soundtrack of the series. Now let's take a look at New Line. Jason Goes to Hell, Jason X, and Freddy vs. Jason. As much as I love the Jason designs in 2 of those movies, it didn't handle Jason too well, especially in Freddy vs. Dumb as a Brick Jason. Have New Line bettered themselves since then? Again, I point to the Nightmare remake. I'm also going to point at the new It movie, It, for a lack of a better word, has a lot of things it did better than the TV movie. But what it did better had more to do with its budget. Did it do it right though? I enjoyed the movie, and it didn't do anything that made me feel like walking out on it, but there was a lot of scenes that could have been executed better. The Ben and Mike thing was a bit why, though, if you know what I'm talking about. And Pennywise, I know he's not meant to be Tim Curry, and he didn't need to be, but it felt a lot like how creepy clowns over the last 9 years are all just Heath Ledger light. The thing about King's stories is that he takes the mundane and twists it, so that the outward appearance is slightly off, and the terror lies underneath. There is nothing subtle about the design of this Pennywise, nor does he ever act much like a clown before his facade wears thin. To this long-winded end, that's why I'm not too fond of the idea of another New Line Friday the 13th. I would prefer to go back through mismanagement under Paramount than see it become a New Line cash cow meme that satisfies a broad audience but leaves fans cold. Don't even get me started on the idea of them jumping into the expanded universe train. Well, that's that for this channel update and Q&A. Sorry again that it's so late. I don't know how this video will be received or where my channel is going to go from this point, but I'm going to keep finding ways to try bring it back, regardless of the outcome of this video, because it's something that I really want to do, and with the events of the last year, between the remake and the game, I feel like I need to don the mask again. Good night, campers and glampers, and I hope to see you soon.